Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
I was the one who sent the monster. I want that understood before I tell you anything else, because the rest of it does not make sense unless you know that I am the one to blame. The thing that walked out of the storm and into that human settlement on a night cold enough to crack stone, the thing with too many joints, and a back that arched wrong, and a mouth that opened in 4 directions like a flower made of knives. I shaped its hunger. I aimed it. I pressed it toward those people the way you press a thrown stone toward a window. And then I sat in a ship that smelled of cold alloy and recycled breath, and I watched through its eyes while 71 humans did the one thing that no species in the entire catalog of hunted worlds had ever done. They fed it. Let me start at the beginning, the way they tell stories. The humans taught me that later. They told me a story should have a place where you put your feet down before it runs. My name, as close as your sounds can carry it, is Sail. Among my kind I was a shepherd. We did not herd anything gentle. We raised cullers, that was the working word for them, the ones who do the culling, and we sent them down to worlds that had been marked for clearing. I want to be honest about what that means, because I spent a long time wrapping it in soft language and I am done with that now. A world gets marked. Maybe it has something underneath it we want. Maybe it simply sits in the wrong place, on a road we mean to walk, and the people on that world are in the way. So we do not send armies. Armies are expensive, and they leave records and they make martyrs. We send one color. We let it work in the dark over a long winter until the settlements go quiet on their own, and then we come down and take what we came for and find nothing left to bury us in guilt. That was the trade. That was what I did. I had done it 11 times before. I had never once gone down to the surface to look. The world in question did not have a name that we used. We numbered it. But the humans called it tear, which I am told was a small word in one of their old tongues for a kind of weed. A hardy, ugly little plant that grows where nothing else will. They had a habit of nomming their hardest places after the toughest, plainest things, as if to remind themselves what they were. I think about that now more than I should. Tear was a frost world on the long edge of a dim star. Not dead, humans do not settle dead worlds. They settle the just barely possible ones, the ones that fight back but cruel. Its days were short and its nights were enormous. The settlement sat in a shallow valley they called the Hollow, sheltered from the worst of the wind by 2 ridges of black rock. There were maybe 40 structures down there, low and hunched against the cold, with steam rising from their vents in thin white threads. Around them stretched fields under hard, clear domes, where they grew pale crops in borrowed light. And around all of that, the snow, going on forever, blew in the long dusk. 71 of them. I knew the number because counting was part of my work. 22 were what they called adults. The rest were old or young or somewhere in the soft middle. There were children. I logged the children the way I logged everything else, as figures in a column, and I did not let myself think the word that the figures spelled. The color I sent them was the best I had ever raised. I will not pretend otherwise. I had grown it across 3 of their years, in a tank of warm, dark fluid, feeding it the memories of every successful clearing in our archive, so that by the time it climbed out it already knew how to be patient. It already knew how prey thinks. It was the length of 2 grown humans laid end to end, low and long, built to move on the ground without sound. Its hide drank light so that even in the open it was a piece of missing world, a hole shaped like an animal. We did not give them names. Names are for things you intend to keep. We gave it a designation, a string of marks, and in my own head I called it nothing at all because I had learned long ago not to. I dropped it from orbit in a pod the size of a coffin, 2 valleys over from the Hollow in the deep part of the night. The pod buried itself in the snow and split, and the color came out steaming into the cold, and it lifted that terrible head and tasted the wind, and somewhere in it the old learned patience woke up. I felt it through the link. We were tied together, the color and I, by a thread of contact I could open whenever I chose. I could see what it saw. I could feel in a flattened and distant way what it felt. I could not control it directly. That was never how it worked. You cannot steer a thing like that. You can only raise it right and trust the raising, but I could watch. And I watched it set off across the dark toward the lights of the hollow with that flowing, low, soundless gait, and I settled in for a long winter of quiet columns going to zero. It found the first human on the third night. He was a young one, out past the domes alone, which was foolish, but the young of every species I have ever cleared are foolish in exactly the same way. He had gone out to check a sensor line that had gone dark in the cold. He had a hand lamp and a tool belt and a coat too thin for the wind, and he was crouched in the snow with his back to the world, working at a frozen junction with stiff fingers, swearing softly to himself in that low human way. I have learned some of their words since. He was saying the names of his gods and asking them without much hope to make the cold less. The color came up behind him over the rise. It was perfect. The wind was in its face, carrying his scent and carrying away its own. It was a shape of absolute black against the snow, and it did not hurry because the patience I had grown into it knew there was no need to hurry. The young human had no idea. He would never have known. That is how it is supposed to go. The cold and the dark do the cruelty, and the prey simply stops being warm one night, and that is all. And then the boy turned around. He did not turn around because he heard anything, because there was nothing to hear. He turned because the line he was working on suddenly read live again. He had fixed it without noticing, and the little green light came on, and out of pure animal habit he turned to follow the cable back toward the settlement, to see if the lights had come back too. So he turned, and the lamp on his chest swung up, and it fell full on the color 8 strides away, low and coiled and ready. I have replayed that moment more times than I can count. I have slowed it down to nothing. I have looked at it from inside the color and tried to look at it from inside the boy, which I cannot do, but I have tried. And here is what I keep coming back to. He did not scream. He did not run. A grown human would have done one or the other, and either one would have ended it, because running prey triggers the chase and screaming prey triggers the silencing, and the color was raised to answer both. But the boy did neither. He was perhaps 13 of their years. He was so cold that his mind was slow. And what he did in that slow, cold mind, looking at a nightmare 8 strides away with its mouth half open, was the single most dangerous thing he could possibly have done. He said, "Oh, hey." Just that. The way you greet a thing you were not expecting but are not somehow afraid of. There was a wobble in it. He was not stupid. Some part of him knew. But the larger part of him, the part that had grown up in a place where every living thing was struggling against the same cold, looked at this enormous black animal standing in the snow with steam coming off it, and saw, I think, another creature out in the cold. Just that. Something else that was alive on a night that wanted everything dead. The color did not move. I felt its confusion come up the link like a slow tide. It was waiting for the running or the screaming, the inputs it knew how to answer, and neither came. Instead, the boy, shivering, did the second most dangerous thing. He held out his hand, not to strike. Palm up, fingers loose, the way they offer themselves to animals they want to trust them. And he said in that wobbling voice, "You lost too, huh?" I should have closed the link right there. I should have let the raising do its work in the clean dark where I did not have to feel it. But I did not, because I had never seen this before, and a shepherd who has done his work 11 times and never once seen this, he leans in. I leaned in. The color took a step toward the hand. I want to be careful here, because I have heard the humans tell this part in ways that are not quite true. They like to say the monster's heart melted the moment it met the boy. That is a children's version. What actually happened was smaller and stranger and, to me, much more frightening. The color was raised on prey that flees. Flight to it is the world's confirmation that the thing in front of it is food, is enemy, is for clearing. A thing that does not flee is, to its grown instincts, simply not yet identified. It steps closer to identify. That is all that first step was. Curiosity, in the technical sense. The thing was trying to find out what category the boy belonged to. But the boy did not flinch when it stepped. He held the hand out and he kept talking, low and steady, the cold making his voice shake, telling the monster that it was okay, that it must be freezing, that there was a warm place not far off, all the while having no real plan and no real hope, just the deep human instinct to keep talking to a frightened thing until it calms. And the color, finding no flight, no scream, no category, did the thing that broke everything that came after. It lowered its head and pressed the flat of its skull, very gently, into the boy's open hand. I felt that touch come up the link. I felt the warmth of the small living hand register against the cold sensors of that enormous head. And I felt, this is the part I have never been able to explain to my own people, the part that ended my life as I had lived it. I felt the color not know what to do, and decide, in the absence of any instruction it had ever been given, to lean into the warmth. Because it was cold too. Because under all the raising, under 3 years of memorized cruelty, it was a living thing on a frozen world, and a warm hand had found the one place on its body that wanted to be touched, and nothing in all its training had ever told it what to do when the prey was kind. The boy's name was Wick. I learned that later, short for something longer that I never heard him called. He was the youngest of 3 and the settlement's worst-kept secret, the one they all pretended to be exasperated by and all quietly adored. He stood out there in the killing cold with his hand on the head of the thing I had sent to murder his family, and he laughed a small, scared, astonished laugh, and he said, "You're not so scary." He was wrong about that. He was so wrong. But he was also, in a way I am still learning to understand, completely right, and the difference between those two truths is the whole of this story. He brought it home. I need you to understand how insane that was, because the humans say it now like it was nothing, like of course he did, like anyone would. He walked back to the settlement in the dark with the color following him. He did not coax it. He just walked, talking the whole way frightened people talk to fill silence, and it followed, low to the ground, a piece of moving night. When the lights of the hollow came up over the rise he stopped, and I felt the animal feel the others, the 70 other warm bodies, the whole prey population, all clustered together in one place, everything it had been sent to clear, and I felt the old hunger stir. This was the moment. Even now, even with the strange, warm thing of the boy's hand, the color smelled that crowd and the raising rose up in it, and for one held breath it gathered itself. And the boy, not knowing, not feeling any of what I was feeling, put his hand back on its head and said, "Come on, it's okay, they're nice, you'll see." And the gather went out of it, like that, like a held breath let go. I sat in my cold ship 2,000 strides up and I did not understand what I was looking at. I want that on the record. I did not, that night, understand it at all. I thought it was a malfunction. I thought the raising had failed somewhere, that I had grown a defective animal, and I felt the particular shame of a craftsman whose work has come apart in the field. I logged it as an anomaly. I prepared already in the back of my mind the request for a replacement color. I told myself I would correct the error. I did not yet know that there was no error, that the thing working in front of me was not a flaw in the color. It was a flaw in everything I had ever believed about what could and could not be changed. They did not welcome it at first. I should be fair. The first thing that happened when Wick walked into the hollow leading a nightmare was that a woman screamed, a real scream, the kind the color was raised to answer, and I felt the animal flinch and start to turn, and only Wick's hand and Wick's voice held it. Lights came on. People came out of the low buildings with tools in their hands. With a few crude weapons, a frontier settlement keeps for the things that come out of the dark, and they made a half circle, and the color put its back to the boy and lowered itself, and its four-way mouth came open, and a sound came out of it that I had heard before on other worlds in the last moments of other lives. The sound it makes before. And an old woman pushed through the half circle and said, "Stop, all of you, stop it. look at the boy. Her name was Hessa. She was the oldest person in the hollow and the closest thing they had to someone in charge, though they did not really do charge, the humans. Not in the way my people do, they did it sideways, through respect and habit, and who had been right the most times. Hessa had been right a great many times. She was small and bent, and her face was a map of the cold years. And she walked out into the gap between the people and the monster as if she had all the time in the world. And she looked not at the color's terrible open mouth, but at Wick standing behind it. "You found it out there," she said, not a question. "It was cold," Wick said. His teeth were chattering now properly in the lights of home. It was out there in the cold, Hessa, like me. I couldn't leave it." And Hessa looked at the color for a long moment. I was inside the color. I felt her look. I have been looked at by enemies and superiors and judges of my own kind, and I have never, before or since, been looked at the way that old human looked at the thing I had built to kill her. She was not afraid. She was sad. She looked at it the way you look at something that has been made to be a weapon and does not yet know it could be anything else. And she said very quietly, more to it than to anyone, "Oh, you poor terrible thing. What did they do to you?" The mouth closed slowly. The sound stopped. I do not have an explanation for that even now that satisfies my own training. The closest I can come is this. The color was raised to read prey, and reading prey is, in the end, just reading. It read flight. It read fear. It read the half-circle of frightened people with their crude weapons, and it knew that script perfectly. It could have played the whole night out to its bloody end without a single surprise. But it could not read Hessa. There was no fear in her to answer. There was no flight. There was only that sad, steady looking, and a question asked of it as if it were a person. What did they do to you? And the color had no script for being asked a question. It had never in its grown life been treated as anything but a thing. And being treated for one moment as someone, it simply did not know how to be a weapon. So it stopped being one. Just for that moment. Just long enough. Hessa turned to the others. "Put those down," she said, "of the weapons. All of you. If it wanted us dead, we would be dead. Look at the size of it. It walked in here behind a child with its head down. I have lived a long time, and I have never seen a thing that wanted to kill us do that." She looked back at the color, at its drinking black hide gone silver under the lights, at the steam coming off it in the cold. "Get it inside," she said, "before we all freeze talking about it." That was the night the humans adopted the monster I had sent to hunt them. I watched the whole of it through its eyes, 2,000 strides up, in a cold ship that suddenly felt colder, and when it was over and the color was lying on the floor of a warm, low building with the boy Wick asleep against its flank, and the old woman Hessa sitting up in a chair nearby keeping watch, not on it, I realized slowly, but over it I closed the link, and I sat in the dark, and I did not log anything at all for a long time. In the days that followed, I told myself I was studying an anomaly. That is the language we use, my people, when something is happening that we are not ready to feel. We make it an object. We make it a problem with a clean edge. I told my superiors that the color had encountered an unusual behavioral input and that I was observing the result before recommending a course of correction. They were not pleased. A clearing is supposed to be quiet and quick, and this one was neither, but a shepherd is given some rope, because the things we raise are difficult. And they trusted that I would tighten it when the time came. I let them think that. I think I half believed it myself. I told myself there would come a day when I would close my fist on the thread, and the color would remember what it was, and the clearing would proceed, and the column of figures would go down to zero the way it always did. And meanwhile I watched. They did not have a word, the humans, for what the color was, so they made one up, the way they make up everything. The children started it. Of course it was the children. By the third day there was a small gang of them that followed the thing everywhere it went, at first from a careful distance and then from no distance at all, climbing on it, sleeping against it, feeding it scraps from their own thin rations even though the adults told them not to. And the children, being children, decided that a thing they loved had to have a name, and the name they landed on, after much argument that I followed with helpless fascination through the color's ears, was Boone. I did not understand it at first. I thought it was simply a sound. Later, one of them, a small fierce girl named Pell who had appointed herself the color's chief protector, explained it to another child who had wandered in from a far field and not heard the story. A boon, Pell said, with the authority of the very young, is something good that you didn't expect. Hessa told me. It's like a present from nowhere. That's what he is. He came out of the dark and he could have ate us all and he didn't. He protects us instead, so he's a boon. So that's his name. I sat in my ship and I heard a 6-year-old human explain to another 6-year-old human that the weapon I had grown across 3 years to erase their entire world was, in fact, an unexpected gift. And I will tell you the truth, because I have decided to tell only the truth from here on. I laughed. It came out of me wrong, broken, a sound my kind does not really make, and it frightened me more than anything the color had done, because I realized I was not laughing at the child. I was laughing because she was right and I had been wrong, and I had been wrong for 11 worlds, and the wrongness was so large that the only thing my body could do with it was that broken sound. Boone, they named the monster Boone. He grew into the name the way a thing grows into a coat it was given too big. At first he simply tolerated them, the children climbing him, the adults edging around him, the old woman sitting up nights. He ate what they gave him and he slept where it was warm and he learned, with that fast deep learning I had grown into him, the shape of their days. But somewhere in the first long week, something turned. I felt it turn through the link. On a night when the wind came down off the ridges hard enough to make the whole settlement groan, and a section of one of the crop domes tore loose with a crack like a bone breaking, and the cold poured in, and the people came running with patches and lights and their breath smoking, and the children, 3 of them, out where they should not have been, got caught on the wrong side of the breach with the temperature falling like a stone. I will not draw it out. Boone went through the wall. Not the breach, the wall, the solid part, the part that was holding the cold out, because the children were behind it and the breach was the wrong way around. He hit it like the weapon he was and he went through it, and he put himself between the 3 children and the wind. All that drinking black bulk turned into a shelter, and he held there, shuddering, while the adults got the patch up around him. And when it was done and the dome sealed and the children safe and crying and laughing the way children do when they have been scared, Boone stayed exactly where he was, curled around them, and would not move until each of the 3 had crawled out from under him on their own. I felt the cold he took. The link does not carry everything, but it carried that. He took a great deal of cold holding that wall, and it hurt him, and he did it anyway, and there was no script for it in anything I had ever grown into him. I had grown patience and hunger and the reading of prey. I had not grown that. That came from somewhere else. That came, I am forced to believe, from the days he had spent being treated as someone. You cannot put into a creature a thing you do not have. And my people did not have that, so I had not put it in. He grew it himself, out of the soil they gave him, which was warmth and patience that ran the other way, and a small girl named Pell who told him every single day that he was good. That was the night I stopped pretending it was an anomaly. That was the night I knew, with the cold certainty that comes when a lie you have been telling yourself finally cracks, that the color was not going to remember what it was, because it had become something else. Something we did not have a word for either, my people. The humans had a word. They had been using it the whole time, in the way they touched him and fed him and named him and trusted him with their young. The word was theirs. He was family. And that, of course, was the problem, because I was not the only one watching. I had filed my reports honestly, more or less, which was my first mistake. A wiser shepherd would have lied, would have reported a clean, slow clearing in progress and quietly let the world below go on living, and perhaps no one would ever have come to check. But I did not yet know that I wanted them to live. I was still half a shepherd then. So I reported an anomalous behavioral cascade in the asset and continued observation, and no progress toward the clearing objective. And after the 3rd such report, the thread of rope they had given me went taut, and a message came down from the conquered that oversaw my work, and the message was short, and the message said this: "The asset has failed. A replacement has been dispatched. Withdraw your link and stand by for the recovery of materials. The clearing will proceed on the original schedule." A replacement, another color. Better than the first, they would say, though there was no color better than Boone. I had made sure of that. It was already on its way. It would land 2 valleys over in a coffin-sized pod, as Boone had, and it would taste the wind and set off across the dark toward the lights of the hollow with the old learned patience rising in it. And there would be no 13-year-old boy with cold, slowed wits to turn around at the wrong moment and say, "Oh, hey." It would do the work. It would do it perfectly, because I had taught my people to make them perfect, and the 71 warm bodies in the valley below, the boy Wick, and the old woman Hessa, and the fierce small girl named Pell who told a monster every day that he was good, would, over a long quiet winter, go down to 0. And they wanted me to withdraw my link from Boone, to pull the thread out of him and leave him blind and alone and unwatched, a defective asset, materials to be recovered, while the thing that was coming came. I sat in my cold ship 2,000 strides above a world named for a weed that grows where nothing else will, and I read that message, and I felt the whole of my life, 11 worlds, 11 quiet winters, 11 columns of figures going down to 0, turn over in me like ice cracking on a deep lake. And for the first time in any of it, I did not reach for the soft language. I did not make it an anomaly, or an asset, or a problem with a clean edge. I let myself think the plain, hard word that the figures had always spelled, and that I had never once let myself read. Murder, I had been doing murder, 11 times over, and a thing I had built to do it had learned, from people who had every reason to kill it, how to be good instead, and now my own kind were sending a second monster to finish what the first had refused. I did not withdraw my link. I want to be clear about how small a thing that was and how large. Small because it was only a decision not to do something. I simply did not pull the thread. I let it stay, the contact between me and Boone, thin and warm in all that cold. Large because from the moment I chose not to obey, I was no longer a shepherd of the conquered. I was something they did not have a word for. I was, I suppose, beginning to become what Boone had become, the long way around, through the same strange door, through being asked, by a thing that had no reason to ask gently, to be someone instead of something. But a decision not to act is not a plan. The replacement was coming, and I was 2,000 strides up in a ship built for watching and not for war, and below me, a settlement of 71 humans slept in the warm dark with their adopted monster curled among them, having no idea that the sky over their world had just turned, quietly, into the thing they should fear most. They thought they were safe. They thought the worst thing the dark could send them had already come, and they had named it Boone, and they had made it family, and they had won. They had no idea it was only the first one. I opened the link wide that night, wider than I ever had, until I could feel the warmth of the room where Boone lay and the small weight of the girl Pell asleep against his flank and the slow, steady working of his strange, remade heart. And I did the thing that no shepherd is ever supposed to do, the thing there is genuinely no word for in my language because it was never meant to be possible. I tried to find a way to warn him. You cannot speak through a link like the one I had with Boone. I want to say that first because what I tried to do that night was, by everything my people know, impossible, and I do not want you to think I had some clever tool. I had nothing. The link was built to carry sight and scent and the dull weather of an animal's mood one direction from the color up to me. It was a window, not a door. Shepherds do not talk to their colors. We grow them and we watch them and we never, ever let them feel us watching, because a color that knows it is being observed begins to perform, and a performing color is a useless one. The first law of my craft was that the thing must never know you are there. So I broke the first law. I had already broken the larger ones. There was not much left in me to break. I did not have words to send him. He had no words to receive. What I had was the window, and on my side of it, a flood, fear and shame, and a wrongness so large it had no shape, and I leaned my whole self against that window and I pushed. I pushed everything I was feeling down the thin, warm thread toward the storeroom where he slept with the girl Pell's fist curled in the seam of his hide. I pushed the picture of the second color falling through the dark. I pushed the cold word I had finally let myself read. I did not expect anything. You do not expect a window to become a door just because you press your face against it and weep. And Boone woke up. I felt him wake. Not the slow surfacing of a sleeping animal. He came up fast and wrong, his whole great body rigid in the dark, his four-petaled mouth coming open without sound. Pell stirred against his side and made a small noise, and he went still around her at once, gentling, but underneath the gentling I felt it. He had taken something, not the picture, not the word. He could not have understood those. But the feeling, the dread, the wrongness, the shape of a thing coming that had gone down the thread and into him, and his remade heart had caught it and known it for what it was. He lay there in the dark with the child against him, and he stared at the door, at the night beyond it, and he was afraid. For the first time since I had grown him, the thing I built to be the fear of worlds was afraid. I am not ashamed to tell you that I wept then in my cold ship, in the way my people weep, which is silent and internal and leaves no mark. I wept because I had reached him. Across 2,000 strides and a law that had stood since before the first world we ever cleared, I had reached down and touched the mind of the monster, and it had answered, and the answer was that he understood. Something is coming. He knew. And I wept because of what that meaning cost, because the only thing I had to give him was terror, and I had given it, because terror was the truth. He did not sleep again that night. I stayed with him on the link until the short gray day came up, and he lay by the door the whole time, eyes open, counting. Not the children, they were all in their beds, all 11 of them safe in the warm dark. He was counting the world, reaching out with whatever sense it is that colors have for each other, the sense I had never had reason to think about because I had never put two colors on the same world before. He was feeling for the other one. And somewhere out past the black ridges, 2 valleys over, in a pod buried in the snow, the other one was feeling back. I should explain that because it matters for everything that came after. Colors know each other. I did not design it. It is older than my craft, a thing that runs in the base of them, in the part we grow from the oldest stock, a way of sensing their own kind across distance, the way the deep predators of cold seas know when another of their kind has entered the water. We had never needed to think about it because we only ever sent one. One color, one world, one quiet winter. It had never occurred to anyone that 2 of them on the same world would feel each other like 2 stones dropped in the same still pond, the ring spreading out until they crossed. They crossed that morning. I felt it happen, felt Boone find the other one, and felt the other one find Boone, and felt the both of them go very, very still, the way 2 great animals go still when they realize they are not alone. And then I felt the other one do the thing that Boone no longer did. I felt it identify Boone, categorize him, sort him into the only 2 boxes a color has, not prey. Therefore, the other box, the box with everything that stands between a color and its work. Rival, obstacle, to be cleared first. I had 2 links open now. I want to be honest about that because for a few hours I tried to do the thing a shepherd does, the small, ugly, clever thing. The Conquered had not actually severed my access to the second color. Why would they? A clean asset on a clean run needs no babysitting, but the channel was there, a faint, cold thing, watching only the way Boone's had begun. So I had eyes on both of them. And for a few hours, gods forgive me, I tried to think like a shepherd one last time. I tried to find a way to turn the second color, to do to it whatever the hollow had done to Boone, to push kindness down a window the way I had pushed fear. It does not work that way. I knew it before I finished trying. You cannot push a thing into a creature that it does not already somewhere contain. The hollow had not put goodness into Boone. They had found the hole in him shaped like a warm hand, and they had filled it, and the filling had taught the rest of him to grow toward warmth. But that took time. That took a small, fierce girl saying you are good every day for weeks, and an old woman asking what did they do to you, and a hand in the cold, and a child's life held safe under a curled black body in a storm. I had hours. I had a window I could only pour fear through. There was no kindness I could pour into the second color fast enough to matter, and even if there had been, it had already found Boone and sorted him, and there is no kindness that survives first contact with a thing already coming to kill you. So I stopped trying to be clever. That was the second death of the shepherd in me. The first was when I did not pull the thread. The second was when I stopped looking for the clever cold solution and admitted that there might not be one, that the people in the valley below might simply die, all 71 of them, in the long, quiet winter, the way I had let 11 worlds die, and that this time I would feel every single name go out, because this time I had not let myself make them figures. I had let them be people, the boy Wick, the old woman Hessa, the grieving man Doran, the fierce girl Pell, and I would feel each one stop being warm. I could not bear it. That is not a noble sentence, and I do not mean it to be. I want to be precise. It was not that I had become good, the way Boone had become good. It was that I could no longer not feel, the way I had trained myself for 11 worlds to not feel, and the not feeling had been the only thing that made the work survivable, and without it I was simply a creature watching people it had come to love walk toward a death it had arranged. I could not bear it. So I had to act, even though I had no plan and no weapon and no authority, and nothing in all the cold universe but a broken ship and a monster who loved children. It turned out the monster who loved children was a great deal more than nothing. Down in the hollow, the humans began to notice that something was wrong. Not because they could feel the second color, they had no sense for it, no link, no old deep awareness of predators in the water. They noticed because Boone changed, and they had learned in their few weeks with him to read him the way he had once read prey. He stopped sleeping inside. The first night after he woke afraid, he took up a position by the main door and would not be coaxed in, and when Wick brought his blankets out and tried to settle him, Boone let the boy lean against him a while and then, gently, herded him back toward the warm buildings with his great head, the way he herded the wandering children, and went back to watching the dark. The second night he began to patrol. Slow circuits of the whole settlement in the long blue dusk and the black night, the perimeter of every building, the edges of the domes, the line where the lights gave out and the snow began. Around and around, his head low, tasting the wind. He did not eat much. He kept the children closer than he ever had. When Pell tried to go out to the near field with her mother's crew, Boone planted himself in the doorway and would not let her pass, and stood there immovable until she gave up and went back inside, furious and crying, calling him names that meant, in the way of small children, that she loved him and did not understand. It was Doran who said it out loud. Of course it was Doran, the grieving man, the watchful one, the one who had been right about everything except the most important thing. He stood in the common building one evening in the warm yellow light with the wind groaning against the walls, and he said what they were all feeling and none of them wanted to say. "He's afraid," Doran said. "Look at him. That thing has not been afraid of anything since the night the boy brought it in. It went into a storm, it went through a wall, and now it won't sleep and it won't eat and it won't let the little ones out of its sight." He looked around at them, at the 70 faces in the warm light. Something's coming. He knows it and we don't. And I don't know what's worse, that there's something out there that scares him, or that we'd never have known until it was on top of us if he hadn't been here to be scared. No one argued. That was the thing about Doran. He was hard and grim and he had been wrong about Boone, but he was not a fool, and on a world like Tear you learn to trust the animal that smells the storm before you do. Hessa in her chair by the heat nodded slowly. "Then we listen to him," she said. "If Boone says stay in, we stay in. If Boone says keep the children close, we keep them close." She looked at the great black shape by the door, watching the dark. "He has not been wrong about a single thing since he came. He counts our children every night. He has never once miscounted." She paused, and something passed over her old face. I think he knows their number better than we do. I heard all of this through Boone's ears, and I want to tell you what it did to me because it is part of the truth. These people, with no sense for the thing in the dark, no link, no old awareness, these people read the change in a monster's heart and trusted it with their lives, on nothing but the evidence of his love. They were better at reading him than I, his maker, had been at reading my own work for 11 worlds. They understood, in their warm, crowded room, a thing I had needed 2,000 strides of cold distance and a broken law to learn, that you can know what is in a creature by watching what it does for you when it is afraid. That night I made my decision. I would go down. You have to understand what that meant. My ship was not built to land on a world, and I was not built to walk on one. We do not go to the surface, we shepherds. We watch from the cold dark and we let the colors do the touching. I had never once set foot. We do not have feet quite as you mean it, but the figure will serve on any of the 11 worlds I cleared. The thought of it was, to me, very nearly obscene. To be down in the weather, in the prey's own place, in reach of their hands and their crude weapons, exposed, present, real, it went against everything in me. And the ship could make the descent only once. It was not a thing you did twice. Whatever I brought down with me, whatever I could do once I was there, that was all there would ever be. There would be no going back up to the safe cold dark. I would be, for the first time in my long, careful life, on the ground, in the world, with the people in the weather, with no window between me and what happened next. I started the descent before I could let myself reconsider. It took most of the long night to bring the ship down. I came in slow and dark, no lights, on the far side of the near ridge from the hollow, in a fold of the black rock where the wind had scoured the snow thin. The ship settled with a long shudder and a groan very like the groan the settlement made, and then it was quiet, and I sat in it for a moment in the dark, on the surface of a world for the first time, and I felt the cold of it come up through the hull, the real cold, the world's own cold, not the cold of the dark between stars that I had lived in all my life. It was different. It was alive somehow, that cold. It had weather in it. It had a smell, even through the hull, the mineral bite of the snow, the thin, sharp air. I had spent 11 worlds 2,000 strides above worlds exactly like this one, and I had never smelled a single one of them. And on both my links, I felt the two colors moving toward each other through the dark. The second one had left its pod. It was crossing the open country between the two valleys, fast, low, silent, with all the old patience I had grown into it now turned into a single straight purpose. Reach the hollow, clear the rival, clear the prey, complete the work. It moved the way Boone had moved that first night, a piece of missing world flowing over the snow, and I watched it through its own eyes, and I felt the terrible competence of it, my best craft, the thing I had built to be perfect, and I understood that Boone, my other best craft, the thing I had also built to be perfect, was about to meet his equal in the dark. And Boone was moving to meet it. He had felt it leave the pod. He had felt it commit. And he had made his choice the way he made all his choices, without anyone asking, on the strength of whatever it was the hollow had grown in him. He had left his post by the door. He had gone out past the lights, out past the edge of the snow, away from the settlement, away from the children, toward the thing in the dark. Going to meet it out there in the open, where the fight would not be near the buildings, where the children would be safe behind him. He had positioned the whole battle before it began. He had chosen the ground. I had grown that into him, the choosing of ground. I had grown it to make him a better killer. He was using it to make himself a better shield. I left the ship. I went out into the weather of a world for the first time. The wind hit me and the cold hit me and the snow traveled sideways across me, and I was small in it, smaller than I had ever felt, a thing built for the dark between stars standing exposed on the surface of a living world. And I went toward the place where my two best works were about to try to destroy each other, because I could not stay in the ship, because staying in the ship was the old way, the watching way, the shepherd way, and the shepherd was dead in me twice over, and I had nothing left to be but present. They met at the bottom of the slope below the near ridge, on the open snow, in the black middle of the enormous night, with the lights of the hollow, a faint warm smear in the distance behind Boone, and the whole dark world behind the other one. I will tell you what I saw, because I saw it with my own eyes and not through a link. The first thing I had ever seen on a world with my own eyes, and I will see it until I stop. They did not roar. That is a thing the humans put in when they tell it, and I forgive it, but it is not true. Colors do not roar. They came together in near silence, two huge black shapes in the blowing snow, almost invisible against the dark, two holes in the world rushing at each other, and the only sound was the wind, and then the sound of the impact, which was not a roar but a deep wet crunch, felt in the chest more than heard, the sound of two things built past the strength of anything natural meeting at speed. The snow flew up around them in a white cloud. And then they were a single thrashing mass, too fast to follow, a churning black knot in the white, and I stood at the top of the slope in the wind with my small, useless hands, and I could not tell, I genuinely could not tell, which of the writhing shapes was the one I had grown the hollow into, and which was the one I had grown to end them. I felt it through both links at once, which is a thing I do not recommend, a thing I would not wish on anyone. I felt Boone's pain and the other one's purpose, layered in the same instant. I felt Boone take a wound along his flank that I had built his hide to never take, and I felt the other one feel the satisfaction of a color whose work is going correctly. I felt Boone do something I had never grown into any color fight not to kill, but to stop, to block, to keep the thing away from the warm smear of light behind him. And I felt the other one exploit it, again and again, because a thing fighting to protect is a thing fighting with one hand, and a thing fighting to kill has both. Boone was losing. I knew it the way I knew everything now, all the way down, with no soft language left to wrap it in. He was bigger, he was my best, he had every advantage I had built into him, but the other one was fighting whole, and Boone was fighting halved, fighting backward, fighting always with one eye on the light behind him and the children sleeping under it. And the other one knew. Colors know each other. It had sorted Boone the first morning, and now it had read him completely, read the divided heart of him, and it was working that division the way Boone had once been grown to work the division in a frightened herd. Drive toward the thing it protects, make it choose, make it spend itself defending instead of attacking, and then, when it is spent, finish it and walk past its body toward the lights. I screamed. I do not know if it carried over the wind. It was not a word. It was the sound my people are not supposed to make, the one I had made once before when a 6-year-old explained that the monster was a present from nowhere. I screamed down both links at once, the fear, the love, the wrongness, everything poured into both windows, into Boone to hold him up, and into the other one, hopelessly, uselessly, the kindness it could not contain and would not take. And the other one felt me. I know it felt me because for one instant it faltered, not from kindness, it had none, but from confusion, the same confusion Boone had felt that first night when the prey would not flee. A shepherd in its mind. A presence where there had never been one. It did not know what to do with that, for one instant, half a breath. And in that half a breath, the lights behind Boone began to move. They had come. The humans had come. Out from the warm buildings, out past the safe edge of the snow, into the killing dark and the traveling wind. I saw the lights of their hand lamps bobbing down the slope, a ragged line of them, and I heard, thin and torn by the wind, the sound of human voices. They had felt Boone go. They had known. Hesse had said it, if Boone says something is coming, something is coming. And when their monster left his post in the dead of night and went out alone into the dark, they had not stayed safe behind their walls and trusted him to die for them. They had taken up their cutting bars and their bolt drivers and their one old projectile thing, and they had come out after him, 71 warm, soft creatures from a world named for a weed. To stand beside the monster they had adopted against the monster that had come to hunt them. At the front of the ragged line of lights, running ahead of all of them, too small and too fast and too foolish to stop, was a child. A fierce small child with a fist that had curled in Boone's hide every night while he slept. Pell. Pell was running down the slope toward the churning black knot in the snow, screaming a name into the wind, screaming it over and over, the name they had given the present from nowhere. And Boone heard her.